25 minutes of pleasure. Well, it's been 9 months. It's been 9 months, and I bought every diaper.
Who was initially excited when you told him you were pregnant. You are furious he is denying your 8-month-old son, Matthew, confessed to sleeping with other men during the time of conception. Is because you married someone else who showed done for your child.
Not a damn thing, Your Honor. I did tell him that the child was not his, but, Your Honor, he was not in a very good place in his life.
Her ex-boyfriend was the father that she was pregnant before she met me.
Yes, ma'am, I did, and I understand that was me being in the wrong. And he walked up to me and asked me about one of my tattoos, and we just clicked from there. We were amazing when we were together. We
had mainly a party relationship, to be honest with you. Neither one of us were ready to be in a relationship nor have a child.
Were you using protection?
No, Your Honor, we were not.
If I was told there was a possibility that it was mine in the beginning, I would have been around.
I've tried to contact him on multiple occasions. I have text messages right here.
I'd like to.
From the moment the case begins, the courtroom energy is tense and emotionally charged. Judge Lake sits at the bench with the calm authority she is known for, ready to dissect complicated relationships, conflicting stories, and the emotional weight carried by everyone who has stepped into her courtroom. This is not just a legal dispute. It is a fight for identity, accountability, and truth, fueled by regret, broken trust, and the desperate need for clarity. At the center of the first dispute is a young mother who arrives with the burden of past mistakes on her shoulders. She has brought her former partner to court, claiming he is the biological father of her infant son. The man, however, enters the courtroom with a very different narrative. He believes she is only nomming him because he married someone else. Both of them are frustrated, exhausted, and weighed down by months of confusion. Their story mirrors countless tests people regret taking, where results reshape families, relationships, and futures. Judge Lake immediately begins breaking apart their stories, layer by layer. She guides them through recounting their relationship, a relationship built mostly on partying, impulsive decisions, and temporary comfort instead of emotional stability. As she listens, she bridges the legal conversation with moral clarity, reflecting the relationship between law and justice that often dominates the discussions in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast and similar legal debates. The mother admits openly that she once told the alleged father that he was not the biological parent, a confession that adds weight to the complexity. She explains that she was scared, overwhelmed, and felt unprepared for motherhood. She says she truly believed she was protecting her unborn child, choosing what she thought would be a safer path. But the courtroom is a place where truth must stand firm, and Judge Lake reminds her that good intentions do not erase contradictions or the consequences they create. Meanwhile, the alleged father argues that he distanced himself because she had insisted the baby belonged to another man. His frustration is real. He believes he was pushed out of the picture deliberately. His new spouse, now part of the courtroom testimony, adds an additional layer by insisting she personally heard the mother say the child wasn't his. Suddenly, the case becomes more than a two-person dispute. It is a tangled web of claims, regrets, and memories shaped by fear and instability. Through all of this, Judge Lake keeps the courtroom focused on evidence, consistency, and the child's best interest. Her approach reflects principles found in the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where the goal is not just judgment but restoration and clarity. Yet the emotional stakes remain intense. The mother expresses guilt for her past decisions, and the alleged father reveals that he grew up in foster care, a revelation that immediately deepens the gravity of the case. He shares how he spent his childhood longing for stability, being moved from home to home, and how he does not want his son to endure the same uncertainty. This echoes the transformative spirit often shared in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals explain the painful paths that shaped them and the deep desire to prevent the next generation from repeating those cycles. He cries when he speaks about wanting to be a better father than the one he never had. It is not just a legal battle for him. It is a personal promise to break generational patterns. As their arguments unfold, Judge Lake questions timelines, sexual histories, and contradictory statements, all essential to understanding the legal truth. The evidence presented includes dated photos, social media screenshots, text messages exchanged between the mother and the man's spouse, and a timeline of intimacy that could support either claim. This mirrors the principles behind adverse inference in evidence law, where inconsistent or information can shift how evidence is interpreted. What becomes clear is that every witness, every message, and every admission shapes the narrative differently. At moments, the mother breaks down, acknowledging she made choices out of fear. At other moments, the accused father grows emotional, explaining how deeply a positive result would affect his life. His spouse, meanwhile, admits she was protecting her marriage but insists the truth must be known. Through this, the courtroom gradually transitions from anger to vulnerability. They each admit wrongdoing, cheating, lying, hiding truths, and reacting emotionally instead of responsibly. Their relationship appears to have been rooted in instability rather than commitment, but Judge Lake repeatedly redirects them to what matters most: the child. When the DNA results are finally delivered, the tension is palpable. Judge Lake reads the results slowly, underscoring the importance of this moment. The test reveals that the man is the biological father. The courtroom transforms instantly. The father looks shocked, emotional, relieved, finally validated after months of doubt. The mother cries with relief and guilt. His spouse, though surprised, accepts the truth and expresses readiness to embrace the child. This moment highlights the phrase "truth changes everything," because the courtroom's entire emotional landscape shifts in seconds. The result transforms relationships and forces everyone to confront not just the legal facts, but the ethical responsibilities that follow. The second major dispute brought before Judge Lake involves another couple, a mother and her ex-partner locked in a long, exhausting custody battle. Here the mother insists that the man is not the biological father of her child, despite his deep emotional commitment and his willingness to travel long distances every weekend just to see the little girl. His dedication evokes themes frequently discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where parental responsibility is often weighed against emotional betrayal and mistrust. This case differs dramatically from the first because instead of a man avoiding responsibility, this father is fighting to keep his role alive. He arrives with records of paid child support, proof of continuous visits, and a sincere desire to remain in his daughter's life. Their conflict reflects the painful gray area between legal rights and emotional truth. When a child calls someone daddy, what happens when biology challenges that connection? Judge Lake asks the mother why she believes he is not the father. Her explanation is based on timelines, early relationships, and alleged overlapping intimacy. But when questioned further, her answers remain inconsistent, creating a troubling uncertainty. As this unfolds, Judge Lake pulls the conversation back to legal clarity. She warns the mother that unfounded accusations harm not just the man but the child at the center of the dispute. Throughout the hearing, the man explains through tears how he rearranged his entire life for his daughter, pushing himself through hardship and emotional strain just to maintain visitation. His story resembles many emotional accounts shared in cheating stories, where betrayal and unresolved emotions complicate decisions that should center on the child's. As the court moves toward results, Judge Lake acknowledges the emotional courage required to face such a life-changing truth. The DNA results reveal he is not the father, a heartbreaking revelation that breaks him in front of the entire courtroom. His reaction is raw and deeply human. Judge Lake's voice trembles as she addresses him, recognizing the pain of a man who gave everything for a child who biologically doesn't belong to him. This moment reinforces the harsh reality that legal truth does not always align with emotional attachment or parental devotion. The emotional fallout of the second case lingers in the air long after the DNA truth is spoken. Judge Lake pauses, allowing the heartbreak in the room to settle, because paternity cases are never just about genetics. They are about identity, belonging, and the fragile emotional worlds children depend on. Her courtroom becomes a space where the human consequences of legal decisions unfold openly, reminding everyone that justice is not merely procedural. It is deeply personal. As the man breaks down in grief, Judge Lake reminds the mother that biology is not the only measure of fatherhood, but deception has consequences. Her compassion toward the man reflects her belief in the relationship between law and justice, a balance explored in many legal discussions, including the Game-Changing Attorney podcast. She highlights that the man's effort, dedication, and emotional investment mirror principles of responsible parenthood far more sincerely than many biological fathers who appear in her courtroom. This painful outcome demonstrates the brutal power of DNA testing, a force that can rebuild families or fracture them instantly. In cases like these, "test people regret taking" becomes a real and painful phrase, even though the pursuit of truth was necessary. The mother's reaction is complicated, part shame, part relief, part worry. She knows she must now face the responsibility of finding the biological father, even though she admits she does not know where he is or whether he wants involvement. The man, however, struggles to breathe through the shock of the result. His voice shakes as he tries to imagine life without the little girl he raised as his own. Judge Lake warns the mother that her celebration earlier, a reaction she displayed when she believed the man was not the father, was inappropriate and harmful. That moment stood in stark contrast to the man's emotional collapse. It reflected immaturity and a lack of empathy, especially considering how deeply the child depends on the emotional stability of the adults around her. Judge Lake's stern reaction reinforces the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where fairness demands sensitivity and consideration for those who have invested emotionally in a child's life. Legal truth may be clinical, but justice must also be humane. Despite the emotional pain, Judge Lake encourages the man to begin healing, emphasizing that his emotional contribution to the child's life will always matter, even if the law cannot define him as her father. She acknowledges the heartbreak but also the dignity of his commitment. In a courtroom often filled with parents trying to escape responsibility, his devotion stands out as rare, admirable, and deserving of respect. After the tension of this heartbreaking case, the courtroom shifts to yet another emotionally charged dispute, a young couple fighting to keep their small family intact. This time, the mother insists her is the biological father of their newborn daughter, while the struggles with deep doubt rooted in both rumors and medical fears. The stakes of this case are different. Instead of separation or custody battles, this couple is fighting for unity. Their future as a family hinges entirely on the DNA test. Judge Lake listens carefully as the mother explains the chaos leading up to the child's birth. She had been in a rocky relationship, briefly separated, and caught between family pressure and emotional instability. The meanwhile recounts how he prepared excitedly for fatherhood, only to be hit with rumors that his partner had been intimate with an ex. The courtroom revisits patterns familiar in cheating stories, where suspicion grows quickly, often fueled by outsiders who have incomplete or misleading information. For this man, the doubt is not just emotional. It is attached to a painful medical history. He explains that one of his testicles was severely compromised, shrinking to a fraction of normal size, causing him to fear that his fertility had been damaged. A doctor once told him he might have less than a 50% chance of fathering a child. This testimony adds a layer of complexity because it raises a biological barrier that could support his fears. Judge Lake invites medical insight to ensure the discussion remains factual and grounded in evidence, highlighting a courtroom where truth must be supported by expert interpretation, not assumptions. The medical explanation reveals that while his condition could affect fertility, it does not eliminate the possibility of fathering a child. The healthy testicle may compensate. This moment represents the importance of the evidence stage in divorce and paternity cases, where assumptions must give way to scientific clarity. The mother's frustration intensifies as she listens to her own mother take the stand and contradict her, claiming that the child may belong to another man. This betrayal adds emotional weight, echoing scenarios often discussed in adoption stories' full episodes, where family dynamics, broken trust, and competing narratives complicate legal decisions. The sits in silence, overwhelmed by conflicting stories. His dreams of fatherhood hang in the balance. Judge Lake notices the pain behind his eyes. He wants to be a father more than anything. He admits that he imagined his future changing once he learned his partner was pregnant. He left behind reckless habits and began preparing for parenthood, embracing responsibilities he once feared. But throughout the hearing, another question lingers. If he is not the father, can the mother identify the real one? Her hesitant answer, that she does know who the potential father is, shakes this trust further. He feels betrayed, confused, and uncertain whether anything he believed over the past months was real. Judge Lake does not allow the emotional chaos to take over the courtroom. She reminds both partners that only the DNA test can deliver certainty. Her control of the narrative reflects her commitment to the Supreme Court, child support principles of fairness, responsibility, and the child's long-term well-being. The truth must emerge, no matter how painful the journey. The confesses that the thought of not being the father terrifies him. He wonders if he could handle the heartbreak of losing both his partner and the child he already loves. Judge Lake encourages him to stay grounded in facts, reminding him that rumors are not evidence. When the results finally arrive, the courtroom becomes silent. Judge Lake opens the envelope with the same gravity she displays in every life-changing moment. She reads slowly, giving weight to the emotional investment both partners have carried into the room. The test confirms that he is the biological father. Relief washes over the couple. The man breaks into tears, overwhelmed with joy, disbelief, and gratitude. His partner cries beside him, relieved that the truth aligns with her assurances. Judge Lake smiles warmly, acknowledging the emotional truth that many couples explore in supportive spaces like the Divorce Course podcast and recovery communities where reconciliation, forgiveness, and personal growth are encouraged. This case stands in beautiful contrast to the heartbreak of the earlier one, a moment where truth repairs rather than destroys. It becomes a symbolic victory for emotional resilience and a reminder of how DNA tests, though risky and feared, sometimes deliver the healing families need. Judge Lake reminds the couple that parenthood requires more than shared DNA. It requires commitment, responsibility, and emotional maturity. She urges them to strengthen their communication, rebuild trust, and focus on raising their daughter with stability and love. In this moment, the courtroom becomes a place of restoration, a space where tears of relief replace tears of loss. The result resonates with the essence of truth changes everything, illustrating how clarity can heal when people face it with honesty and courage. As the courtroom transitions into its next emotional chapter, the themes of justice, responsibility, recovery, and family continue to echo. Every case that enters Judge Lake's courtroom becomes part of a larger narrative, a narrative where truth, no matter how painful or liberating, has the power to reshape entire futures. As the next case begins in Judge Lake's courtroom, the emotional atmosphere from the earlier disputes is still present, a mixture of fear, hope, and the weight of life-altering truth. Each participant enters with their own history of regret, uncertainty, and longing. And once again, the courtroom prepares to confront the complicated reality of parenthood, responsibility, and the undeniable force of DNA evidence. In this final dispute examined today, another young woman arrives determined to hold her ex-partner accountable, convinced he is the father of her infant son. Her demeanor is a blend of frustration and desperation. She insists that she has raised the child alone but now seeks legal confirmation of paternity so she can move forward. Judge Lake listens carefully, gathering the threads of a story shaped by instability, youthful mistakes, and emotional turmoil. The alleged father enters the courtroom defensive and visibly anxious, prepared to argue that he was never a committed partner and that she had told him repeatedly that he was not the father. This conflict mirrors the kind of emotional unraveling often discussed in cheating stories, where regret and miscommunication create a storm of contradictory claims. Judge Lake quickly identifies that the relationship between the two was far from stable. It was a casual, party-driven connection, lacking responsibility and long-term planning. The mother admits that during the early stages of pregnancy, she panicked and said things out of fear. She acknowledges that she told him he was not the father because she believed he was unprepared for parenthood, and she doubted he could provide the stability her child needed. Her admission demonstrates how fear, especially during pregnancy, can lead to impulsive decisions that later cause confusion and emotional damage. Judge Lake reminds her that while fear is understandable, clarity is essential when a child's identity hangs in the balance. The mother's attempts to correct her earlier statements were often ignored, blocked, or met with hostility. That tension escalated further when the alleged father's spouse joined the conflict, defending her marriage and rejecting any possibility that her husband fathered the child. This complex web of overlapping relationships, mismatched timelines, conflicting messages, and emotional injuries reflects themes also explored in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals acknowledge their mistakes and fight to rebuild trust. The courtroom becomes a space where the consequences of unresolved emotions appear clearly, pressing everyone toward accountability. Witnesses complicate the story further. The alleged father's spouse testifies that the mother assured her the baby was not her husband, insisting she had no intention of pursuing child support or involvement. This triggers Judge Lake to examine the credibility of both sides. She consistently reiterates how vital honesty is during the evidence stage in divorce or custody cases, because inconsistent statements can cause courts to make incorrect assumptions, a danger recognized in discussions around adverse inference in evidence law. Judge Lake's courtroom functions like a living example of jurisprudential principles, where ethics, responsibility, vulnerability, and truth intersect. She navigates each admission, each emotional breakdown, and each piece of evidence with the purpose of protecting the child's best interest. Her voice remains steady even as the emotions of the participants swell and collapse. Her approach mirrors the discussions of fairness and moral grounding often explored on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where experts reflect on how clients' personal struggles shape the legal process. Tensions rise when evidence is introduced. Photos showing the couple together during the likely conception window, messages suggesting the mother attempted multiple times to contact the alleged father, and testimony indicating he rejected involvement out of anger or doubt. The mother also reveals that she has been sober for many months, working hard to stabilize her life. Judge Lake responds calmly but firmly, acknowledging her progress while reminding her that understanding legal truth requires consistent honesty, not emotional outbursts or shifting narratives. The alleged father expresses his own painful truth. He grew up in foster care, moving through more than 40 placements. That experience shapes everything: his fear of fatherhood, his mistrust of unstable relationships, and his internal conflict about wanting stability for a child he wasn't sure was his. His vulnerability adds depth to the case, illustrating the psychological weight many parents carry when confronting their childhood trauma. His desire to avoid repeating generational cycles echoes the emotional path often described in adoption stories' full episodes, where children raised outside of traditional families struggle to build secure identities. Judge Lake listens with understanding, recognizing that his hesitation was not rooted purely in irresponsibility, but also in pain, fear, and learned survival instincts. Still, she emphasizes that emotional wounds do not excuse avoidance when a child's identity is at stake. The law demands clarity, and truth must be faced head-on. As the case progresses, the courtroom becomes a space of confessions and raw honesty. The mother admits she hid her pregnancy from certain people out of shame and fear. The alleged father admits he partied heavily during that period and was not prepared for the responsibilities of fatherhood. His spouse admits her hostility came from insecurity, jealousy, and her determination to protect her marriage. Judge Lake helps each of them confront the role they played in deepening the confusion. Her words carry the same authority expressed in discussions around the relationship between law and justice, making it clear that emotional truth matters, but legal truth must guide decisions. She refocuses the group repeatedly on the central question: the child's identity. Everything culminates with the DNA results. The envelope, again delivered with solemnity, represents the final barrier between confusion and clarity. The courtroom, once filled with the echoes of accusations and regret, becomes silent. Judge Lake opens the document slowly, reinforcing the weight of what is about to be revealed. The results confirm that the alleged father is indeed the biological father. The revelation transforms the entire dynamic instantly. The father's shoulders shake with relief, disbelief flooding across his face. His spouse looks stunned but then softens, realizing the truth is undeniable. The mother cries, a mix of guilt and gratitude as her fears finally give way to certainty.